Welcome back to another video. Today we're going to talk about Q&A, and we're not actually going to talk about Q&A, it's just we're going to do a Q&A today. And it's going to be kind of off the cuff because I have this tendency to be a total control freak over every corner, every aspect of these videos, which I think it's kind of counterproductive in some ways. So for a celebration Q&A video, I'm going to try my best to be a human being and not just a talking robot, because when I script some of my videos, I feel like I'm just literally like a talking robot. That's what I was. And actually, 2 minutes before, I had this urge to plan out everything that I was going to say on these pads of paper. And halfway through, I just thought to myself, that's kind of crazy. You're connecting with your audience. And by the way, thank you guys so much for 16,000 subscribers. My challenge for today is to burst through or blow through some of these questions without dwelling on any one of them, without ending up delivering a 40-minute lecture on each one of these questions, because my brain just the tentacles of my brain, they tend to reach out to multiple different disciplines and grab crap together and at the end synthesize them together. That's how my brain kind of works. So I have to try really hard today not to do that. Not because these questions are not interesting, not because I don't want to talk about these questions in depth. It's just there's so many of them. Don't get offended if your question didn't get picked. Don't get offended if my answer is very brief. There are a lot of them here. I don't want to record a 60-minute video because my camera is going to explode. First question. What pushed you to start writing? Simply, the passion for writing. If you're a painter, you paint. If you're a writer, you write. If you're a teacher, you teach. It's very intuitive. It's very straightforward how that works. Once you find your life's passion, you just gotta go for it. Not really pushing yourself to do it. It's a calling. It draws you toward it. Do you have any hobbies besides reading and writing? Well, there are different degrees of commitments, for sure. And how it works in my head is just, there are very important things that I sort of pour in all of my attention into. And there's sort of these auxiliary things and these things that I don't exactly pour that much attention to, but nevertheless, they're still hobbies. So I love figure skating. I've been learning a lot of figure skating. Besides figure skating, I love playing the piano. I love classical music. And besides classical music, I love theater. I love learning languages. And at some point, I even attempted to learn yodeling, which I'm not going to perform here because that's going to cause a lot of trouble. Who and what do you think you were in a past life? Well, I'd like to think of myself as my literary idol, so to speak. But the problem here is I still don't know who that literary idol is. It changes every day. Changes every second. I could be anybody. Today I might be Kafka, tomorrow I might be Shakespeare, and the day after I might be Thomas Pynchon. Do you like John Steinbeck? No, haven't read enough Steinbeck to really make a formal judgment on that, but I'll get back to you on that. I have The Grapes of Wrath and Of Mice and Men on my bookshelf. Really looking forward to digging through some of those Steinbeck books. I think the covers look very interesting, but I'm just really excited to actually sink my teeth into some more American literature reading after I finish what I'm reading right now. Have you ever been to France? Would you like to go? If so, what parts of France would you be interested in? Half of these questions got chopped off and I couldn't expand it because I took screenshots because Instagram deletes all the questions after a day, which is kind of annoying. I'd love to go to Paris, and that's kind of like a stereotypical answer, parce que j'adore la littérature française comme Proust, comme... Laugh at me all you want, my French isn't that great. I'm still working on it. Still working at it. So Parisians, if you're watching this video, laugh at me all you want. I'm just trying to blend in. And I know you guys love your language very much. That's why I'm trying so hard to learn it. How did you come out with the idea of writing a book? Book writing is very interesting. The first book, Learn in Disguise, was a literary experimentation. It's like an adaptation of The Sorrows of Young Goethe. No, The Sorrows of Young Goethe. And I thought about it, and I want to write a similar, a modern twist to the classical romantic tale. So that's how the first book came about. But then I think all of my novels, they have a central idea. Also L'Académie also falls into that category. They have a central idea that I'm trying to tackle. And after tackling that central idea, there are all these tentacles of characters that sort of addresses the main thing. So there are tentacles and there's the main thing. You should never ask where your ideas come from because these questions are just virtually unanswerable. Is there going to be a chance that you'll be making a podcast? I don't think so. Because there's too much on my plate, and my main pursuit is going to be writing, and that's sort of where all of my attention and energy are going toward, and that's just the stake on the table. Writing for me is my principal craft. It's something that I'm investing a lot of energy into, and also academic research, hopefully I can work myself toward a professorship. But making a podcast, it's going to take a lot of time, going to take a lot of effort. That's probably not going to be on my list for a little while. But however, next week I got invited onto the Socratic Method podcast, which I'm pretty excited for. Check out the Socratic Method podcast. They make excellent content on philosophy, on literature, basically what I'm doing, but their videos are longer and more in depth. So check them out in the description down below. Next week I'll be doing a podcast episode with these guys, which I'm really looking forward to. What are your views on postmodern literature? Then again, haven't read enough to really form like a really solid opinion of it. But right now, I am chewing my thumb over Jacques Derrida's Writing on Difference. This is one of the toughest books I've ever attempted. Now I'm like 10 pages in there. I'm already sweating out of every one of my pores. It's pretty brutal, but I can see how I can enjoy the rest of this book. It's like one of those like weird, twisted academic joys where the more boring the book is, the more excited you get. I think it's just me on caffeine right now. I'm not making much sense. And also, for the last year of high school, I did a year of research on Michel Foucault. And even though I want to say that I'm kind of an expert on Foucault now, but yeah, still, postmodern literature and like philosophy it's such a tricky area to navigate that I still don't feel comfortable like offering a formal opinion on what do I think of postmodern literature, for example. I don't like, unless I have every nook and cranny figured out, I wouldn't feel comfortable talking about postmodern literature. But in the future, I think that's one of the areas that I'm really interested in, deconstruction and literary interpretations, and also Foucault's interpretation of history. It's a very controversial philosophical topic. That's why I need to do more reading before I really talk about postmodern literature. I know I don't know, and that's what I'm going with here. How do you deal with disliking your work? Do you simply keep working till you like it? Watch my video on stupid writing. Basically, you have to work through that fear or that disgust with your own writing before you can write something better. You have to go through the stupid before you get to the good. So watch that video. It explained everything, so I don't have to talk about it again here. Which university do you go to? That's classified information, and plus you probably don't want to meet me in real life. In real life, I'm kind of different. In real life, I'm just incredibly shy. If you approach me on the street, I'm literally going to flip out and never talk to you ever again. Social anxiety is real. There's a reason why I record all of my videos in this very room. I'll stab you with a knife. What is your advice on writing multiple stories at a time? I'm a pretty single-minded person, but I can sort of see the value of working on multiple stories at a time. I really favor longer works over short stories because I feel like short stories is so much harder. It's so much harder to pack so much into one little piece than if you expand it out into this entire, explorational, bigger piece for you to work on. I don't know if I'm making any sense, but longer works, they allow me to kind of explore every nook and cranny that I want to explore. Writing novel or writing a book is really like an exploratory process for me. It's like letting the characters go and then seeing how they would handle certain situations, how they would dip into their surroundings, and how they would relate to their to other characters in a book. And that process itself, for me, it's very satisfying. For me, it's very refreshing. Short stories, they're too short for me to really do any extensive exploring, and that extensive exploring is what I'm really passionate about in writing. And if you're talking about working on multiple short stories at once, I think personally I would find it really difficult. But, you might be different, but I'm a very single-minded person. I like to work on one story or one novel and get it finished before I move on to the next one. It also prevents me from just jumping from one project to the next because I really hate unfinished work. It really depends on how you work, but one piece of advice that I would give is just you have to finish. You just have to finish. If you start 4 stories and never finish on any one of them, that's kind of that's just not a very, very good way of doing it. Aim for completion instead of exploring new ideas, because novel ideas are always better. New ideas are always more exciting. You have to suppress that urge for excitement to actually finish the projects. Our curiosity keeps changing fast. How to handle that so the book that I'm reading doesn't change fast? That's an excellent question. Like I said before, for the previous question, aim for completion. Another thing, which I talked about in one of my previous videos, which I don't exactly remember which one it was, read less than the amount of pages that you think that you should be reading. So there's a logic to it. If you read too much, you burn yourself out and you don't exactly want to look at the book again. But if you read less than the amount of pages that you think that you should have read, that builds up this like consistency. Like it's a very consistent way of tackling literature. For example, if you want to set out to read 40 pages of something and you read that 40 pages and you get bored of the book altogether, like where's the point in that? Instead of reading 40 pages, read 10 pages a day and keep that going for a month, 2 months, 3 months. And what you're going to find out is that you can actually finish books. Don't jump on the excitement wagon too soon. What you're going to realize is that if you jump on the excitement wagon too soon, you're going to quit a lot of books that are going to be really potentially enriching. You're going to miss out on so many books, so many great parts of a book because you're going to read the first 40 pages and just like throw it away because you're chasing that excitement wagon. Read less than the amount of pages that you think that you should read. You keep the consistency going so you can combat that sort of urge to chase the excitement wagon. It also makes your reading process a lot more rigorous. You can actually have a shelf full of books that you've finished instead of, a shelf full of books that you like half finished. It's not very satisfying that way. Start a book, aim to finish it. If it doesn't click with you halfway through, you can probably put it away, but like read less than the amount of pages that you think that you should have read, and then through doing that, build up the consistency so you can actually finish. Top 10 books at the moment. Sign up to my newsletter weekly. Book recommendations are, through the newsletter. What do you think of mental disabilities represented in writing? This is a very dangerous trap that a lot of people fall into. Mental health is extremely important. Physical health is extremely important. And there's this elusive romantic image, which I personally fell into at the beginning of my writing career, which is this like tortured genius archetype, like awkward tortured genius archetype. There's a danger to it, really, a huge danger. You shouldn't neglect any aspect of your personal life. I don't care what you pursue. If you want to pursue theater, if you want to pursue writing, if you want to pursue, they should not be done at the cost of any other aspects of your life. Personal development is a continuous journey of bettering the self, bettering the physical self, bettering the emotional self, and bettering the intellectual self. Don't turn into sort of like a hyper-intellectual where you only take care of your head and not taking care of your body. Body's important. Without a really strong body, your head just wouldn't think clearly. So for myself, I stick to a very rigorous, sort of exercising routine. So what I would do is I wake up first thing in the morning. I have this circuit that I go through with regards to my personal fitness goals. And in the background, I have this French podcast playing. So I found that to be a very relaxing approach to taking care of my physical health and also getting that French into my brain, which is sort of like feeding my brain with really good information. So through doing that, I'm taking care of both sides at the same time. You don't want to fall into the trap of being a tortured genius. Tortured geniuses, they succeeded in their craft despite of their mental illnesses. They didn't succeed because of their illnesses. It's a very tough balance to achieve, but art would be so much better if one comes from a more mentally healthy place. That's my personal opinion. Why don't you do book reviews? There's a very specific reason why I don't do book reviews. I'm not really interested in what I think of a book. I'm more interested in finding out objective methods that you can apply to reading a book, because literature is such a subjective thing. And the most objective thing that I can do is to give you the sort of methodology in which I approach writing with, and you can sort of take away that methodology and draw your own conclusions. I'm not really interested in debating people about, the meaning of certain books and, the story behind a book and then, what the book should represent. I feel like that's a very personal choice. I feel like that's your burden to carry. That's your burden for you to make up your own mind. And my entire channel is basically about making up your own mind about books, about literature, about anything that you read, basically. It's your burden to carry. It's your burden to draw your own thoughts out of that book. And speaking of which, you should absolutely read How to Read a Book by Mortimer J. Adler. It's really, really, really damn good. This is my second time reading it, and some of the stuff in this book is just incredible. Absolutely must read. If you are in any shape or form an avid reader, read this book. Buy this book, read it tonight. It's just fantastic. Will you read Thomas Pynchon? Of course, Thomas Pynchon. So I have Gravity's Rainbow right here. I think I'm going to start tackling Pynchon right after I finish my Hemingway novel, the Hemingway novel that I'm tackling right now, that I'm reading right now, really enjoying. I think after Fiesta, I'm going to read some of the university stuff, and after university stuff, I'll finish reading Jacques Derrida. Derrida's probably going to take a very long time. And I think after Derrida, I'll have some time to tackle Thomas Pynchon. And it's going to be a really exciting write. I'm pretty excited for Thomas Pynchon. It's going to be a pretty trippy journey reading through Thomas Pynchon, but I'll keep an eye out for, I look forward to sharing with you guys some of the stuff that I've, picked up from this book, or some crazy lessons that I've learned from the book. Pretty damn excited for Thomas Pynchon. Do you ever catch yourself watching and reading mainstream movies or books? Name them. Right now, I am obsessed with House MD. So Dr. House, it's a fantastic medical TV show. That's just something that I'm really into at the moment. But like TV just bores me. After a little while, I'll get really into one series, and that series is going to start to bore me, and I'll like stop the series. I'll probably finish the series because the series deserves a second chance or something like that. But at the end, I always find myself crawling back to books. Yeah, TV shows are great, but I just they're not as stimulating as books. They're not as multi-layered as books that I can pick apart. There aren't many components for me to think about. So TV for me, it's a great pastime. I'm loving House MD right now. And if you haven't watched Dr. House, go watch House MD. Great show, great character development. Absolutely love it. But that's just, I can already feel myself getting bored of the show. And I'm already crawling back into Hemingway, or crawling back into some of the stuff that I'm reading instead of keep on going with the show. Do you include real situations or true-to-life characters in your writing? Of course, I consider myself a realist writer. It's one of the things that I, for the second novel, it's a little bit different because it's a dystopian novel, but many of the places in the dystopian novel, L'Académie, they're based on some of the places around where I lived, some of the places where, I took the bus, some of the places where I went to school. So yeah, I'm a pretty realist writer, because I feel like it's easier for me to come up with those descriptions and emotional descriptions and how I reacted to those sort of environments if I personally had been to those places before. Or abstractly, it's kind of hard, but I do a lot of people watching and do a lot of place watching, and I write certain remarks, I jot down certain notes of certain places that I want to incorporate into my fiction. So then when I actually get around to writing the novel or the story, I can just pull it out of my head or pull it out of a notebook, and it's going to be a really easy process for me to really, reconstruct the scene, really, use motive language or use the place as a template. That's how I work. I love realist fiction. I feel like realism has the potential to really explore human experience. And that's how I like to write characters. They're based on real people in my life. And, it's just easier for me to write that way. It's a very practical kind of reason. Do you think we should separate the art from its artist? Absolutely. My literature professor told me that, autobiographical interpretation is one of the, less reliable ways of interpreting a piece of literature. And in my own writing as well, I don't talk about my personal writing that much. I give updates and announcements, but I don't actually share much real stuff. On Instagram, I share excerpts, but they're very small excerpts, but I don't exactly want to talk about the thought process behind my fiction. I'll tell you what it is, but I wouldn't tell you how I came up with it, because I feel like that's the stuff for me to figure out. That's not the stuff that you should know, because that's going to tint your perspective when you're reading the actual piece of work. I would rather you get the book and interpret the book in your own from your own set of perspectives, from your own set of life experiences, and from your own sort of paradigm, other than me coming up with something or coming up with the official interpretation for you to then interpret this piece of literature. I feel like that's a lot less fun. It's gonna be way more fun if you tell me what you think of my book, instead of me coming up with my own official interpretation. All of you guys have to fit into my interpretation. I don't have any objective criticism or objective objections to, merging the artist with the art. I think it's a pretty cool idea, but I would rather, if I create a piece of book or a piece of novel or a piece of content, I would rather you walk away with your own set of interpretations. It's just a lot more fun. Suggestions for building self-esteem when writing. As I said before, go watch the video on stupid writing. you have to get through the stupid stuff. Self-esteem, you have to do it. You have to write a bunch of times. You have to write a lot of horrible stuff before you can like remotely get to know your own creative voice, remotely get to know your own prose, remotely get to know your own sort of like, what's your process when attempting a novel? There's like this emulation stage where you look around yourself, where you're like, am I this author or do I write like that author? So there's this period where you always are distracted by other voices, but there's gonna, if you write more, if you keep writing, if you write more, there's going to be one day where you're going to be completely confident in your own sort of like creative voice, and that's where I want you to be, and that's where I want you to get to, is to get really, really involved with your own authentic creative voice, and then you can talk about, building your self-esteem as a writer. You have to get the stupid thing out of the basket first. You have to throw away those stupid words, stupid pages, before you can have any kind of self-esteem in your own writing. Just write more, keep going. One day it's going to happen, I promise. Write with the goal that one day I'm going to completely sound like myself. I'm going to write like myself. I'm going to be myself, and just go with that. Anyway, my camera's about to explode, and I think I covered a vast majority of these questions. It's been a pretty fun session, and I look forward to the next one. And again, very off the cuff, didn't plan any of the answers. Thank you guys so much for 15,000 subscribers, and if you hadn't signed up for the newsletter, I would recommend that you do so by clicking the link in the description down below. There are going to be a lot of like exclusive shenanigans that you just don't get from this YouTube channel, and by signing up, you get all the perks. So sign up right now, it's worth your time. It's Writers Saturday today, and I shall catch you up later.